Right now, join on the set live, Gabe Galanda, Indigenous rights lawyer. How are you?
Wonderful, Amari. I'm stoked to be here with you this morning.
Yeah,
Good to see you.
Welcome to the Morning Update Show.
Yeah, we're here. And as they say, it's a good day to be Indigenous, especially the day after yesterday, where, as you know, the city council elected the first Indigenous president in its history. And our brother, Bruce Harrell, which not a lot of people know, also happens to be of Indigenous ancestry by way of Choctaw Indian country. So we have two Indigenous leaders at the helm of our city, which, of course, is named after an Indigenous chief.
Yeah, I saw that yesterday. It was interesting because I interviewed Councilmember Juarez last month. And actually, before you get out of here, I want to follow up with you on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. But I interviewed Councilmember Juarez, and at that time, she said that she was pursuing the city council presidency. And that's kind of one of those weird parliamentary things that the public isn't too privy to. It's like some kind of caucus or whatever. But saw there yesterday that she won and won unanimously.
Yeah, and I think what was exciting about her campaign, if you would, is it was supported by 13 Indigenous nations in Western Washington, 6 urban Indigenous organizations, and then Black and brown community leaders from throughout the city. So it was Black and brown people in Seattle, King County, and Western Washington that helped make history.
Right. Well, I mean, we can't sit here and say that we want to center the voice around Black Indigenous people. I mean, Indigenous person who's representing or at least supported by a lot of Indigenous nations. So listen, I reached out to you because I was following all this stuff and talking about disenrollment. And finally, you see it enough times, it really works. If you mention something enough times, you're like, what is this? And I sent you a message and I'm like, yo, what is this disenrollment? And you're like, yo, it's kind of like if you're part of, I'll say tribe or nation, don't use all the right terms, but you're a part of a nation, a sovereign nation, one of the and basically they kick you out. You're no longer. Maybe you can give a better explanation of what disenrollment is, and then we can talk about what's going on up at Nooksack.
Disenrollment is a situation. I would not even call it a process as a lawyer. It is a situation whereby people whose birthright to be Indigenous, meaning a right they have recognized since their birth or since they could remember, is being stolen from them by politicians that have been elected to lead their nation or their tribe or their community. And you have, unfortunately, in the era of a $28 billion annual Indian gaming industry and lots of other money floating around Indian country that has never historically existed in Indian country, you now have a phenomenon whereby these politicians will get elected to run a tribe, and then they will want to hold on to all the goodies and all the monies of the tribe and concentrate them within their political base so that they stay in power and their base stays fat and happy. And they are willing to then get rid of large groups of their relatives who they consider adversaries or enemies.
All right. So a few things there. Now, forgive my ignorance, right? But wouldn't it be that if when you're talking about lineage and bloodlines, I don't know a lot. I'm sorry, Dad, because I know you know everything and I should be paying more attention. But isn't something like that to be determined through more of like a cultural process than a political process?
Historically, yes. So before 1492 or 1776, Indigenous societies in the land we now call the United States used to recognize each other based on a principle called kinship. And it basically meant if you were born unto your mom, dad, clan, society, homelands, you belonged there. And it was that simple. Along comes the United States and colonial forces, and starting in the late 1700s and early 1800s, to belong to a now called indigenous nation or tribal nation, that's the words of the colonizer, you needed to be on a list or a census or a roll. Fast forward 200 and some odd years later to 2022, there is now great acrimony and controversy about who is on the list and who should be kept on the list or who should be taken off the list. When historically speaking, as a matter of kinship, if you were born there, you belonged there, biologically, residentially, cosmologically. This whole notion of membership and roles or disenrollment or blood quantum is all colonial stuff.
granted, but this didn't seem to be that big of maybe a deal. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I don't operate in Indian country or native indigenous country as much as I should. I'm waiting for more invitations.
Yet.
But maybe this wasn't that big of an issue before gaming and before these different revenue streams came onto these native lands.
You're correct. So here's a fact for you. 10,000 indigenous citizens have been disenrolled by the politicians of over 90 tribes in this country, which is 15% of the federally recognized tribes in this country. Those are some big numbers. Those numbers did not exist before 1988, when Congress passed the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act and allowed tribes, or essentially tribes, reserved the right to self-regulate gaming. And now, several years later, it's a $28 billion industry. And under that federal law passed by Congress, the proceeds of the gaming enterprise can be distributed to tribal members on what's called a per capita basis. Well, the sick math is if you're a tribe of 2,000 and you're getting $500 a month in per cap, as it's called, and a politician says, well, let's get rid of 1,000 of our relatives, I will promise the remaining 1,000, $1,000 a month. That politician then carries out his or her wishes, and he has the support of the remaining 1,000 to do that. That's what's up.
I'll be honest with you, man. That just don't sound right. But two, that's how it's really going down.
Yeah.
So is this the issue up there in Nooksack?
Not exactly. Rather than 1,000, it's 300. They don't have per capita checks from the casino that they operate, but they do have a lot of goodies. In fact, this whole thing started in December of 2012 when a father tried to get his young children enrolled in December. It kind of serves as an open enrollment season because they gave out $250 per member for Christmas. And then in the summer, they gave out another $250 per kid for back to school. Those monies, those $250 checks, were what gave rise to this whole thing. 10 years later, they're now fighting not just about those school supplies and that Christmas money, but jobs, land, homes, salaries to be on the tribal council. It's all about material wealth.
All right. So here's the thing. Like, with all due respect, the Nooksack, when you look on a map, bro, it's much smaller in size, in area, in population, and definitely in revenue when compared to the Tulalip's, when compared to the Muckleshoots, compared to the Puyallups. Why is it that, and that's big money. You go Emerald Queen Casino, I mean, it's big money. Very big and big infrastructure, and up there in Tulalip, it's Walmart up there and everything else. You're talking about Nooksack. It's very small, it's very rural, and even though they have a casino there, I mean, it's not pumping out a lot of money. So how is it that all this disenrollment is happening there at Nooksack with very little revenue coming through, and you have these big entities, like I said, like the Tulalips and the Puyallups and the Muckleshoots, and we're not hearing about disenrollment?
It's a good question. This is about hatred, vendetta, political power, and greed. The current group of politicians that are running the tribe and have run it since 2012 got themselves elected to office, and they realized that if 300 members who are my clients exercise their voting rights, as they had historically done, they exercised them again, say in 2016 or 18 or 20, that those people would no longer be in power and control all of the goodies. So they simply exercised a concerted effort starting in 2012 to get rid of my people because they did not want them coming back to the ballot box. That's what it's about.
Man, this seems like I mean, it's almost like a movie plot, to be honest with you. It's like, you know, it's something that you see, you're like, man, let's collude, let's kick these guys out, let's do. I mean, this is actually what I've been following on the news is there's the eviction. So it's more than like just like, hey, you know, you're not entitled to this revenue or this share of whatever. They're actually evicting people, right? And the evictions, the only thing that stopped the evictions was the snow.
So my clients are the so-called Nooksack 306. They appeared on a list in 2012 of 306 relatives who were going to be disenrolled. 63 of them still live at Nooksack, almost a decade after this thing started. And you can imagine the attrition this would take on a family of 300 when you're being persecuted day in and day out. Your kids don't get a backpack. Your family doesn't get a Christmas check. You've been fired from your jobs. Well, yeah, now to finish the job, these politicians are trying to take my folks 21 homes. These are HUD homes funded by the federal government through the tribe that my folks have been living in for as many as 25 years. And under federal lease to own arrangements or home buyers arrangements, they own the home. Now they are on tribal dirt. They don't own the dirt like we might if we have a deed to our home, but they own the actual structure thanks to a federal subsidy. They are now being threatened of having those homes taken and them evicted from those homes in the dead of winter during a pandemic amidst a variant surge without due process of law. And they won't even let me represent them without even the right to a lawyer. That's how atrocious this is.
Yeah, no, this is real interesting. I mean, when you talk about one might tend to think when you're talking about this is driven by more than just money. It might be driven by hatred or emotion or whatever, because evicting anybody in the middle of the winter is cold, bro.
Yeah. Well, here's a storyline for your script. The current chairman of the tribe, Ross Klein, who's the man that told the New York Times in the face of 5 requests from the federal government to please stop the eviction so we can figure out if civil rights violations are occurring. That comes from the Department of Interior and HUD, which has funded the homes. He says, no, we're going to proceed without concern for due process, without concern for civil rights violations, without concern for the United States. And get this, you know what happened to that man in 2000? He pled guilty in the United States District Court in downtown Seattle for embezzling HUD housing monies from the Nooksack tribe. We are talking about a criminal enterprise.
Yeah, but all of that to this, not pushing it to the side. No concern for you. I mean, yeah, no concern for HUD, no concern for Bureau of Indian Affairs, no concern for humanity. Dog, to evict somebody in the middle of the winter, putting on. So West, actually, we got an overlay here. Can you put this up here, someone? This was the New York Times, and I mean a big story there. The New York Times. This is now a national story, and we have the link. We'll go ahead and put the link in the comments to this. What kind of feedback are you getting here across Western Washington, across our state, and then also you can bring that down, someone, and also nationally now, because this is now a national story.
Well, I first want to thank Mike Baker, who runs the Seattle Bureau of the New York Times, lives out in West Seattle, for spotlighting this. Him and his photographer went up there in Whatcom County right around Christmas. There was snow all over the place, icy roads. He went up there and spent a Tuesday with my folks for an entire day. Was in their homes, was out there while they were drumming, was out there waiting for the tribal cops to show up with eviction papers. So I just want to give him thanks for putting that on the front page of Monday's New York Times. The response has been overwhelming. And the response almost to a person, whether you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, black or white, is the one you just made. How could this possibly be happening? What about the humanity? How could human rights violations, and I'm talking simply the right to live in a home with security and livelihood intact, how could that fundamental, universal human right owed to us under any international law or domestic law be threatened in these 21 homes in these circumstances? People cannot comprehend it.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I mean, this is what piqued my attention was I kept thinking to myself, I was looking at the story and following along on different platforms, and they kept saying that these people were trying to be served or actually evicted in the middle of and I'm just thinking, I'm like, right here in the city of Seattle, unless anything has changed, and I hope that it hasn't over there at Seattle Public Utilities and City Light, that in the city of Seattle, in these kind of conditions here, and if you can't pay your bill, you call City Light, be like, man, I got my kids, my babies here. I can't pay this bill right now. The city government has always shown enough heart to be like, we ain't gonna turn off your power. We're not gonna turn off your water in the middle of these extreme conditions. And so that's why it's just mind-boggling to me that in the dead of winter, they'll go to remove these people.
And what's even worse than that? They are sending out armed, badged police officers to serve my folks, some of whom are as old as 80 or 85, some are as young as in their 30s with young families, with eviction papers, when I have said, I will accept the papers. However, stay away from my folks. Email them to me, fax them to me, scan them to me, send them down here and I'll take them. They are being so cruel and so inhumane that they are sending armed badge cops out repeatedly to my folks on the weekend, at night, to intimidate them at their doorsteps with being evicted.
So I'll be honest with you. When looking at this in the New York Times and following this along, one of the things that people always say is sovereign rights. It's almost like it's almost like at this point they're airing the dirty laundry to a whole nation now, and two, of like what's going on, and two, this federal government that for as long as I can remember as a small kid is like, hey, you guys let us do our thing. You know what I'm saying? Stay away from us. But right now, it's outreach to the federal government and all these different agencies there to step in and make something happen. Why that shift?
Well, the United States, for as long as it has been the United States, under the Constitution, Supreme Court cases, has a trust obligation to protect the health and welfare of indigenous peoples on tribal lands. So I have been telling the United States government now for 10 years, under law, you have a moral trust responsibility to prevent the violation of human rights on indigenous lands, in particular on Nooksack indigenous lands. But in general, the United States increasingly takes a hands-off approach to that, saying the tribes are sovereign. They are self-determinative. It is not our business. Now, historically, it has always been the federal government's business. But in modern times, they try to take a hands-off approach. And so the dilemma we are now in is when tribal sovereignty or self-determination is being used to commit atrocious human rights violations, where does sovereignty stop and start? Where's the human rights protection? Can you really have a segment of our society who are indigenous peoples who have no Bill of Rights protection on their own lands? And think about that. Indigenous peoples on their own lands are the only citizens or residents of this country that do not enjoy protection under the Bill of Rights. First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, 10th Amendment doesn't apply. That's the situation we're in, and the United States needs to deal with it.
Man, so what's next? I mean, what you said this is a 10-year fight that you've been in here. What's next, though? I mean, what are some of the next steps you guys are taking? What are some of the things that the Nooksack are doing up there? I mean, what's the next phase of this?
Well, what I would do in a normal democracy, in a normal government, in a normal society, is I would go to any court of law and I would get an injunction for the violation of due process, property rights, the taking of land without just compensation, the violation of a right to a lawyer. But because this group of politicians has incinerated their tribal court and won't let me practice there, or any other lawyer who is adverse to the tribe, I can't do that. So my only play is right here in the court of public opinion and diplomatically to the United States government, and believe it or not, to the United Nations. So I've called upon the United Nations to tell the White House, to tell HUD to stop the evictions. I have called upon the Department of Interior and HUD to stop the evictions. They've written 5 requests to pause the evictions. Now I'm asking the president, this administration, who believes they are bastions of human rights protection, to stop these evictions. You cannot have evictions like this occurring in America in 2022, especially after the last 2 summers we've all lived through.
Wow. I've definitely learned a lot. I didn't realize it was that bad, to be honest with you. And before I shift up here, because I got one more question, how can people, if they want to follow along what's going on or be supportive, anything, why don't you tell them what they could be doing?
Sure. So my clients have formed a GoFundMe. They're trying to raise $63,000, $1,000 for all 63 relatives to be used however they can to keep themselves in house and home. That's on GoFundMe. You can follow them on Twitter at Nooksack306. You can follow me on Twitter at NDN, as in Indian lawyer. And you can otherwise plug in to social media pretty much anywhere. If you Google Nooksack306 or type that in as a hashtag, you will find all sorts of opportunity to support this family. And I really ask that you do. And if you could do anything to tell your congressman or woman, the White House, the federal government, your governor, to not allow this to proceed, please do that. I am asking for more calls to be made to anybody in a position of power to help stop this human rights atrocity from continuing.
Man, one last thing before I let you go is Council Member Juarez, when she was here a few weeks ago, the main discussion we talked about was missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And she said, she was like, man, if media could just do something. And she talked about, like, back in the day, you know, the milk crates, there would be like, you know, have you seen this person? Said, if the media could just do something, even if the media could make a 60-second spot that just had the photos and the names of the missing and the found, right? And so I know you're here, you're connected to a lot of the tribes, the nations surrounding Seattle, you know, and this is the first place that a lot of people come looking for right here. We want your support in helping to connect us with all these different nations around us, because we want to be a resource to be able to bring these missing women and girls home, or be able to bring some closure. So we're putting you on the spot here so we can make sure and do our part. Trey Holiday said yesterday that she was like 100%. Salman over there said, man, that this is something that we could probably do twice a month here. We could make a 60-second spot, and we'll produce it here, and then we can send it out to all the other tribes in the region, and, you know, social media. And we just want to do our part, but we want you to help us do our part and connect us with all the proper people we need to talk to.
I'm here for that. I saw that show. I saw you get emotional. I saw you put yourself in the shoes of an Indigenous father and imagine your daughter not coming home. I saw that. So I know that struck you, and it certainly strikes me. And I represent two sisters at Tulalip, whose sister went missing in November of 2020, and she's not home yet. And there's a $60,000 reward for any information leading to the return of Mary Johnson. And so this is a real live issue that is devastating families, many, many families, more than we can count. And getting back to that human rights dilemma, part of the reason our women and our girls are going missing from tribal lands is, imagine a place where you don't fundamentally have human rights protection, right? So these issues are related. Those become places that are havens for trafficking, havens for addiction and affliction that cause our women and our girls and our men and our boys to go missing. And so we just all need to do a better job about making sure that everybody in this country, including those living on Indigenous lands, are safe and have the promise that was supposedly made to everybody: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because right now, Indigenous peoples do not enjoy that promise.
Well, we're committed to working with you. You know what I'm saying?
It's mutual.
Let's see what we can do. Gabe, Galanda, thank you so much for taking time to join us.
Thank you. It was my honor.